Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Evolution of CI/CD Virtual Roundtable hosted by Incredibuild. I am Jim Schultz. I'm the head of community at Incredibuild, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's discussion. We've got a great group of panelists here. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves real quickly as well. Some of these people you might already know, but KK, if you don't mind going first, and then Oleg, Awilina, and then Dory.
All right. So yes, I'm Kohsuke. I kind of accidentally started creating what eventually became Jenkins in 2004. And then that sort of like set me into this direction of my passion to the developer productivity. And then for the past 2 years, I launched a new startup called Launchable. And hopefully you've heard about it. But anyhow, that's what I do.
So yeah, my name is Oleg Nashев. I'm one of Jenkins core maintainers. I also work on the Jenkins governance board, and I'm a CDF technical oversight committee member. If you have ever seen Jenkins on GitHub or on Jira, probably you have seen my name. And yeah, I like Jenkins ecosystem, Jenkins community a lot. I'm looking forward to its evolution going forward, and I'm happy to participate in this session.
And my name is Ewelina Wilkosz. I work for a company called Verifa in Sweden. I'm a consultant. I theoretically specialize in continuous integration, continuous delivery, but practically I specialize in Jenkins. And I'm also a Jenkins community and Jenkins governance board member. And happy to be here.
Hi all, my name is Dory Exterman, and I'm the CTO of Incredibuild in the past decade. If you don't know Incredibuild, we provide market-leading build acceleration platforms with our unique distributed processing and smart caching technology. And we accelerate these builds for the world's largest code bases for the most successful companies. And as part of my role as CTO, I frequently meet with dev leaders to discuss their challenges and their thriving to get the best performance and productivity. And
we're talking about the evolution of CI/CD. So in terms of evolution, we're going to break this into past, present, and future. So let's start in the past. So like all of our panelists here, I've been in this space for a while. It was before it was really called DevOps, right? Or even before there was CI/CD, even before there was Agile. It was all kind of waterfall back then. We had build engineers that were using manual or using like Word documents for manual build process. And then came along things like Hudson and Jenkins and even BuildForge is where I was back in the day. Incredibuild was around back then as well. But my question to all of you is, so in the realm of CI/CD, if we look back in the past, what are some of the things that we got right along the way? What should we have done differently? Any other insights into kind of where all this evolved from and where it started from? And Kohsuke, again, I know very, very broad question, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond first to this one.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I feel like maybe the first thing a first part that really got this idea of things popular is the idea that now we could harness a lot more computers around the software development, because back then, you're really only using the computer in front of you, or just a laptop, or in my case, like a sun workstation, right? But as the computing became more abundant, it made more sense to take advantages of that. And so I think this was the kind of like a mechanism that fit that need. So I feel proud about that. And that was, for me personally, a primary motivation. Another thing I think is that the software development became a lot more collaborative, I think, in the past maybe 2 or so decades. Like back then, it was a lot more individual work, and the collaboration required this like a common understanding of the state of the world. So there was nowadays it's less so, but back then, that the CI system provided this like a common truth that the people can agree on, like which test is passing, what change broke something. So that I feel like it's another thing we got right. And I also like to think that we didn't try to build this like a one size fits all opinionated solution, but this is more of a generalized solutions, right? So it was the maturity of this practice that's such that the people are, people needed to be able to build their own thing. So we provided a great foundation for that. Another thing I feel proud of. Now, it comes to what we got wrong. I don't know if it's wrong, might be a wrong way to frame it, but things that I think we untapped potential maybe is how I think about it. And that's right now, all that work that's happening in like a running build and test is basically reduced down into one bit of information, which is like a green light next to the pull request, right? And then whether you press the merge or not. So I feel like that's a lot of wasted opportunity. Like you have a lot more opportunity to actually learn from what's happening in a lot more detailed way. So I hope we kind of get to work on that in the coming days and maybe years. Yeah.
What's a green light now, right? It used to be a blue light.
Well, thanks for asking, but if I start talking about that, it's going to be another 5 minutes. So I'll spare you that.
Oleg, why don't you go next? Thank you,
Okay.
KK.
Yes, thanks. My story with continuous integration and continuous delivery started in a quite different space. Actually, my background is hardware engineering, and I started using Hudson exactly because of the reasons listed before. It was a basically generic automation framework, which I would be able to adjust to my use cases, which is electronic design automation, hardware tests, simulations, computing grid management, and all kinds of all style operations and deployment. And I was able to do everything with Hudson and Jenkins. And for me, the framework part was a big key reason for its success, as well as being Java based. So I was able to run Jenkins everywhere where Java was running. For example, I was using Jenkins on Connex, on ARM long ago. And yeah, it has been a great experience for me. So over the past years, CI/CD space changed a lot. So when you ask what we did get wrong, actually, I would disagree with this question, because every few years we just live in a completely new world, because environment changes, development tools change, programming languages change. So when Hudson was created, there was no even virtual machines as widely adopted on the market. Then we had virtual machines, then we had containers, now we have Kubernetes, clusters, and for every of this environment, you can build a new solution which would be totally optimized. And for me, the biggest achievement of Jenkins is that basic and Hudson, and that it paved the way for new generation of tools. Because when you start looking, many of them actually learned from Jenkins. Some of them were more opinionated to target new environments. Some of them just didn't need the old use cases, because yeah, now you can build a fully container-based CI/CD like. And yeah, this what changed, and for me it's a great evolution, and it's nice to see that CI/CD space evolves with the entire industry as well as the tooling.
Awesome, thank you, Oleg. And Ulina, let's go to you next.
Yeah, so my past experience is mostly from a developer's perspective. And I remember my first experience with continuous integration, continuous delivery is that it was something that happened behind closed doors. For maybe the doors were made of glass, because we could actually see if Jenkins is red or green. But it was something very much detached from what we were doing. I had no idea what's the tool and who's maintaining it. And I slowly learned, because I became a member of a DevOps team. so I became a little bit closer, but there was this wall between developers and people that were maintaining continuous integration system for them. So it was great, because we developers, we were getting feedback, and we were getting this feedback fast, but it wasn't always the feedback that we would ask for, because we were not involved in setting up the tool, configuring the tool, and using the tool. We were just looking at it. And it took some time for some a little bit more proactive people to actually, break down the wall and make their way to the room behind the glass doors. So it slowly started, overlapping. Developers were involved with some parts of whatever was going on with Jenkins. But I do remember that it was something that some smart people somewhere did, and they just delivered the results to us. And from the tools perspective, it was either some super smart homemade scripts developed by some brilliant people that were becoming so complicated that only these people could understand them, or it was Jenkins. So that's how the past looked for me. And yes, the thing that I think we could have done a little bit better from the start is to make this CI system part of the developer's responsibility much earlier. But well, I'm still happy with where we ended up.
And you talk about this like a glass door, and like I do feel like there's this like a tug of war between like the CI system behind the scene. Like I even claim in some places this truly is behind the wall. Like people don't see it. Like once they leave the pull request, and then there are other places that they try to bring more visibility and like access to make it accessible for the whole person. I see like they have both like a good side and downside. And I kind of wonder how it's going to play out. I feel like a trend has been shifting on this front from left to right and right to left.
One of the last in-person meetings I had before COVID was I won't say who it was, but it was with the DevOps team at a certain company, and they were behind a locked door, so the rest of the company didn't have access to the DevOps team. So I thought that was pretty fun. But I think in most cases that wall is coming down. So I think that is very positive direction. Dory, let's go to you next and to wrap up this one.
So I'll start. We are hosting Kohsuke, so I'll start with saying that of course it was perfectly designed and written. So that's the first thing to say. But no, really, I think that the fact that Jenkins is so widely used today across so many industries, and that it's such a huge and vibrating ecosystem is the best kind of proof that the concept of the platform is valid, and it's valid for many years. So I think that this is the only proof we need. And of course, as Oleg said as well, things are changing, and the need of the dev market today are very different than what they were some 10, 20 years ago. But when I'm looking from our current position in time, I think that maybe even in the beginning, we could have had a better concept of visibility and quality that is entwined into the Jenkins platform itself, that kind of connects and drive insights. And that's something that Kohsuke just mentioned in the beginning, and it really resonates with what I feel, is that something in the platform that connects and drive insight from all the various and many times fragmented and siloed tools that are used within the CI/CD process. This is something that I feel we could have done or established something right at the beginning that would have made it even more possible. I feel that we are still missing a more holistic approach to this huge ecosystem that exists within Jenkins. For example, I'll just give an example. For example, and that's something I'm thinking of, if a change in a specific model is made, and this change in this model frequently makes a specific set of tests fail, then I'd like to know about it as a dev manager, so I can either shift left these tests to be executed by the developers prior to committing their code to the CI/CD cycles, or add better documentation for this piece of code that will prevent developers from creating these types of changes that fail the continuous testing, or later they can create regression bugs in production. So this is just a small example out of many, and looking at Jenkins today with its 1,500 plugins, I believe that the mission of connecting them all as part of a more holistic approach and visibility is a mission that is still waiting for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Dory. And of those 1,500, I think that Chuck Norris is probably the only one that you need, right?
It's, I took a while for me to understand what's the point of it, but I eventually came to understand that it was whatever gimmick that makes bring people to, this visibility and data that we just talked about. That's a net positive. So that way I truly came peace with this idea that, it's like, what is this for? But yeah, so I think there's some real reasons for that. Something like that is useful. Yeah.
And I believe it's coming.
It was a part of original gamification before gamification became, I think, as a term. And now there are even more plugins with various scores. So why not?
Okay, cool. Well, let's that's interesting. Let's jump on to the next one. Let's talk about today. So we were just talking about the past, and back then everyone was talking about basically the same tools, right? There weren't a whole lot of things yet. People were doing scripting, cruise control had been around for a bit, but that was one of those proprietary tools that really, made it difficult to to implement with lots of different types of environments and applications. But then along came Jenkins and things like BuildForge. I just found out people are still using Ant quite a bit. I didn't realize it was still so prevalent, but that's still around. Incredibuild was around. But if you look at the landscape today, if you go to CNCF and look at the landscape page, I don't know if you guys ever do that. I was going to actually bring it up and share it, but it's too big. But it's mind-boggling. I don't even know how many, 1,000 different tools, right, that are all in this space in different categories. So the question I have for all of you is, if you're looking at today's landscape and all the different options and methodologies, where do you even get started in terms of implementing the latest and greatest or versus optimizing legacy tools and approaches? And so Oleg, I'm going to throw that big monster of a question at you first.
Oh. What if I had a 100 slides presentation for this question, which I shared in the chat?
Oh, you actually did? Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just to answer quickly, there are multiple generations. Currently, I consider 3 main generations of tool. So one is, let's say, classic tools, including Jenkins, TeamCity, and many other tools. Then there is 4th generation, which was rather more opinionated, focused on container delivery, like GitLab CI, GitHub Actions, etc. And there is also 5th generation emerging now, which is rather focused on a Unix way. So not a single tool that does everything, but a small tool that does particular job well and integrates well with others. So from what I see, these are 3 types of tools on the market at the moment. All of these tools make total sense. All of these tools should keep evolving. And yeah, for me, depending on use case, you can take one of them. So platforms like Jenkins, they really allow to automate everything. So if you need to highly customize, to have a highly customized system, you rather would take Jenkins or maybe something from 5th generation when you glue everything together. But if you glue things together, you still need an orchestrator, and hence you might use Jenkins for that. So for me now, if I start a new project, like you ask, I would either take Jenkins or the automation framework, or start building something fully cloud native with all these new technologies, Tecton, glue everything by CRDs. But even if I did that, I would still have preferred to have Jenkins-like user experience for myself, because from a developer experience standpoint, it doesn't matter whether your system is cloud native or not. I want to have great reporting, great insights, so what we touched multiple times. And actually, Jenkins historically has been a really great fit for that. It has one of the best unit test reporting, coverage reporting among all CI systems, and this is what we still can leverage as users, even if we live in the cloud native world. Okay, probably it was too fast, but
No, I think that Jimmy just muted.
Yeah, Jim.
See,
You're back.
I'm the host too, and I thank you very much, Oleg. Ulina, let's have you respond next.
Yeah, so the landscape is so big and constantly evolving, I can't keep up. I'm the one who's supposed to specialize in it, and I'm sure I don't know most of these tools. So this is a little bit scary, but you can always learn. And the way I approach it when I have to help a team to figure out how to do their CI or how to fix their CI, what's the main driver is the user experience and user satisfaction, because at the end of the day, it's the developer that has to be happy with the way they work and they build they create their software. So I work with teams that invested a lot in Jenkins and are comfortable with their solutions that are sometimes very complicated. But I agree with Oleg, you can customize a lot. And if you have a complicated build system, if you rely on a lot of things that you have on-prem and some hardware that has to be attached to the machine that runs the test, Jenkins is great for that. And I still see there's a lot of people that are very happy with Jenkins. But if I get to work with a new team that is just starting their journey with some kind of automation, often some of them have some experience or some preferences, and we just try to make it work. And the great thing about the present is something that I don't know, 5 years ago for me would be pretty difficult to imagine, is that the cloud is becoming a standard in those big enterprise companies. I thought they will stick to the prem because security, but the cloud is there. And most of the developers can create their own virtual machine just like that and try different tools. So they don't have to guess, they can try things, they can experiment, they can figure out what works best for them. And depending on what they are doing, there are things that work out of the box, and it makes no sense for them to have a full-blown instance of something that they have to maintain on their own. So I like how it looks now. I like how much more the companies became flexible. It makes it a little bit more complicated for me to do my job right, but it's exciting.
Well, it's too bad you like how it looks now, because it'll probably change tomorrow, right? I mean, everyone just got used to using cloud, like you said, and companies are more comfortable with it and approving cloud deployments. And now we're throwing Kubernetes into the mix and complicating it all over again.
Hey, that's the job security for us. So.
That's right. Dory, let's have you go next.
So that's a huge question, as they said, and but I can tell you that if you're asking where to start, whether it's the latest and greatest or optimizing legacy, what approach to take, I think that during my long conversation with a lot of technical leaders, that are really looking to renovate, and make their build environment the most efficient in the entire release and development cycle. So as myself, as an enthusiastic evangelist for development productivity, I believe that productivity and agility is where I'd put a huge focus on. At least, if you ask me in a position where I'm already in a company that has a CI/CD cycle, I believe that shortening these dev cycles is a main pillar in an endless process of ongoing improvement. But starting there it makes a lot of sense. And this approach is also backed up by a relatively new role that's gaining a lot of momentum in the dev space, which is called a productivity engineer, which is kind of a new role with the main purpose of ever improving the dev workflow and productivity and performance of the dev cycle. And something that I see very often during my decade at Incredibuild is that once a dev cycle time is reduced, once you start with that, you'll see that this cycle will run much more frequently than before. For example, if you'll take G-test executions that instead of running for 11 hours are now running for 11 minutes, and in this case, I'm referring to a real use case, then this transformation directly leads to a cycle that now is being executed much more frequently. And of course, that besides the obvious time and productivity gain of reducing 11 hours to 11 minutes, the mere fact that you can run a cycle now 20 times a day instead of just running it 2 times a day gives you 18 more cycles a day to learn from and to improve from. And once your cycles are short enough and optimized, then it's easier on this basis to start, more optimization, because you can then add additional quality steps, add additional tools, learn more frequently, fail more frequently and fast, and experiment more, because if experimentation will take half a day just for tune-ups, I believe that you'll do them less frequently, and then you'll be able to improve less. So I'm a big evangelist for productivity and performance. And when you have a very good, solid base, then you can start improving your entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dory. And KK, yeah, you want to wrap up this one?
Yeah, it turns out that the speed is a feature on its own. It's a very much I do believe that. So since all they covered, I mean, the technology stuff is covered, and so I guess I'm going to take like a slightly different angle. So I think the one thing that is worth thinking about when you're putting extra effort like this is like, what are you like? How like what are the impact that this say automation or like a new automation that you're adding on top of this one is supposed to help? Like what is the impact? And then because in some sense, like the people involved in this, like people on the other side of the glass door, as Evelina described others earlier, we kind of feel taking it for granted that the things we are doing is going to move things forward, and we think our users, okay, the developers, also understand that instinctively. So I see people all the time that that's enough for them to justify putting this effort, but what's left behind is the rest of the organization, the people who authorize the money, people and stuff. So I think the measurement and the getting more insights out of the system, if you're trying to improve the delivery speed, like what is the speed, and then so that you can show the progress you're making, and I think that is actually pretty crucial. So think about, sometimes I think it's useful to think from that angle. So what is it, like, why are you taking on this like automation? Like, what's the pain? And then try to describe this in terms that the non-technical people will understand, and then measure that and show progress around it. And that way, I think the effort can garner more support. And then you have, I think I trust that the old are smart and figure out the right technology to put together. Like those things could change, like if that's justifiable. Like, like it's not like you have to, the decision you make today, you kind of have to be stick with it forever. So I think, think about those, like impact, measure those, like the cycle time, level of lateness you're trying to control, etc. Then go for that.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you have to understand the possible impact, right? And how much effort it's going to take to get there, isn't it? And is it really worth going down that path, or should I spend that effort other places to receive a different impact somewhere else?
Yeah, it's often hard for the people, DevOps people, to show the impact that they're making. Like, oh, I prioritize this, like, build. Okay, like what does it even mean? Like, people can't tell. That's the unfortunate. I think that's a lost opportunity.
Thank you, KK. Any other points on this topic before we go to the next one?
I just wanted to add to what Kohsuke said, that I totally agree with that. And I believe that, when we're looking at measurements, especially when you want to prove your ROI, I think that one of the things that a lot of time our customers are missing, or DevOps managers are missing, is that they try to quantify the tangible measurements, okay? The ROI, the time saved, the productivity gain. But there are other kind of return of investment of their work, which is less quantifiable, the ability to get, to be in production in time, to be predictable with production, to be able to have less regressions. I think that's less tangible ROI, which is very difficult to measure. And sometimes it's even more, being at the market in time when you are a AAA game developer just before Christmas is even more important than other stuff in many senses. So I think that non-tangible ROI is also an art that dev managers need to learn how to surface to their managers.
Yeah, I saw one, I'm sorry to drag this out, but I saw one team who is like doing an developer survey to the teams, and the VP of engineering is held accountable to keeping them happy. I thought that was brilliant. It wasn't like they weren't trying to come up with this like a one numeric measure. They are like polling their developers if they are the customers, and they are the customers indeed. So that really helped them justify, look, like my developers are complaining about these things and I got to address these things. And that was, I thought, a great move.
Happy developers, happy life, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. Let's jump to the last point here. And we've been talking, I think it's a lot of fun talking about 20 years ago, look where we started. It was like the Stone Ages, and look where we are now. We're doing all this great stuff. But the reality is 20 years from now, we're going to be looking back at today and laughing about how ancient things seem. But we have come really far, right? Like we already talked about it. Things like we've seen the evolution of VMs and mobile and CI and CD and DevOps, cloud. We talked about cloud native and microservices, all this really great stuff. But if you think 20 years from now, are we really going to be looking back and laughing about, we were talking about Kubernetes and DevOps. What was DevOps? That was, whatever. But my question to all of you is, like, do you have any predictions for the future or hopes for the future in this space? Are there any trends you think that are up and coming that we should be paying a lot of attention to? Things like AI and quantum computing. And how do we best future-proof or prepare for the unknown? And Ulene, I'm going to give you this one first. Again, another big, broad topic, but take this any direction you would like.
I'll take it into the future. So I can't imagine 20 years from now, really. Maybe I can dream about trying to predict the next 2 years or something. It really changes so fast. But what I see now, and I think the trend will stay, especially since the companies managed to, they stopped clinging to their on-prem and they moved to the cloud, suddenly security that was important before became critical now. And I have never heard so much talk about security related issues 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And there is, well, maybe that's specific to customers I work with, but there is the whole compliance requirements, and there's always a lot of security requirements regarding that. We put things somewhere in the cloud, and then someone can find a back door and then get access to the infrastructure within the company. So this is really dangerous, and I do see a lot of focus on people educating themselves in that area. And I think another aspect that I noticed is that people, since again the cloud, and I know we have no idea how it's going to look in a few years. It's so easy to change between tools. It becomes a little bit complicated when you have so much choice. But I actually discovered when I was trying to figure out what this GitHub Action thing is, and then I looked around how GitLab and Circle CI are dealing with it, that actually the way of using and the language they are using, or the syntax they are using, is very similar. So it's nice to see that there is some kind of, well, I mean, it's not the same, but there is some kind of standardization going on. So it's not impossible to easily switch from one thing to another. But the best thing that if you want to make sure that the tool you're using is going to be still useful in 3, 4, 5 years, I think you should look for a tool that is open source and have a big lively community, because the people who are members of this community, the actual users, will make sure that the tool is being developed in the right direction. It's not going to be some project manager idea, and it doesn't mean that project managers don't know what they are doing, but it must be much better to have thousands of people contributing with their requirements or fixes. So that's why I usually, when I have a chance, I try to find an active open source project and check what tools they are maintaining.
I love your mention of community. That's my job security. So look for lively communities, lots of people using and supporting the tools. So let's, thank you, Elena. So Dori, do you mind taking us into the future next?
The future, there are so many options, and I think that if you put 20 people who are really into the trends that are, we are going into, I think that you can have 20 answers. So you just need to pick one, and I think that another thing to consider is that you have, from what I perceive, is that you have trends and you have mega trends. And you have these mega trends just drives trends that are more specific within this niche. So for example, in our domain, I believe that one of the more interesting trends will be related to quality, to agility, and to fast and predictable time to market. So today, in most dev organizations and dev groups, and especially in large enterprise-grade software, there is a huge technical debt in automated testing and test coverage, which prevents a full embrace of continuous delivery practices. And all this, I believe, is part, and this is part of the mega trend of agility. And this mega trend of agility and time to market that pushes the software community to improve its methodologies and productivity, I believe that it's going to be a huge challenge for dev leaders, because in order to move towards some way or another of continuous delivery, dev managers must eliminate the human factor from the equation and rely on end-to-end automation processes that they feel confident about and that can also continuously improve. And I already see that this huge testing technical depth is driving exciting technologies. One of the things that I'm looking at and very, very enthusiastic about is AI for writing unit tests, or AI that helps developer write their tests faster. For example, check out DiffBlue, which is a very interesting and exciting startup in this domain. And I believe that as part of this trend, I believe that we'll see more of these technologies emerging to address this huge market of test automation technical depth. And of course, that once AI will write these tests for us instead of us developers writing them, they will be at the hundreds of thousands in large projects. And having a huge number of tests will, of course, make them slow the process again, the build process, and circle back to my first point of productivity solutions, such as Incredibuild distribution and caching, or running tests that matter, such as the startup that Launchable that Kohsuke is targeting. So I feel that the next couple of years are going to be very interesting in the area of CI/CD, and I'm very, very eager to see which trends are going to really flourish in that time, in the next couple of years.
What I heard, Dory, was eliminate the humans. So instead of keeping the developers happy, we might be keeping the robots happy, right?
Eliminate them from this process and, make them useful to improve other stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Dory. Kohsuke, do you mind responding next to this?
So speaking of robot, I sometimes feel like, this like a large progression that we are making is like into building a robot. So like at first we built this like a building block of automation, right? Something that repeats, simple things all the time. It's almost like an actuator that flex the muscle, like building, testing. It's all the building blocks, like all unit of automation that can be repeatable. And then so we started, putting together like this robot arm and leg, and then start combining them so that they move together to do some broader things like the delivery pipeline that covers from change coming into the later. And then I kept talking in this session about like a measurement data. That's almost like a little bit like building a nerve system into it so that we can see what's happening in these like muscles and different body parts. And I feel like therefore like the next logical, almost like I feel like a logical next step is to build a brain that's so like connected to all this data and drive these activities so that humans are not the one that's coordinating this. Like we are not the one, we shouldn't be the one that's deciding, okay, smoke test, which one should I put? Like is it running nightly or should we be running like twice a week? Or like those things like should be almost like automatable decisions. Somewhat like when we shifted from like a manual transmission cars to automatic transmissions, it became, like more, automatic so that we can up level. So Launchable, like Dory was explaining about like how this like visibility and speed matters. In some sense, like what Launchable is trying to do is also building this brain so that we can, so now that we know your goal is to trying to, improve the turnaround time and balance that with security, we can tune the process automatically for you as opposed to, like you trying to make this like a jaggy shifting of the gear at certain critical juncture point. And then more often than not, like not getting the maximum torque from the system. So I feel like that's what's going in the system. And in the world toward the future, like I see, when you look at some of the ahead of the curve engineering organizations to try to like what they are doing to try to gain the next level of the productivity boost. Many of them do come from this like a data analysis field. Just look at how the teams like Google and Dropbox are doing the flakiness. That's entirely built on like a data, like a mass to the extent that you'd be shocked. So that's, I think, where the world is going. I'm trying to democratize that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kike. I think I did it. I think you did another talk at another event that we did that was about that was strictly focused on the future of CI/CD. I think you brought up some of the same points then as well. But yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Oleg, let's have you wrap us up in the future here.
Okay, so let me start from doomsday scenario then for my vendors. So what I believe in is that in the future, many things of what we know as CI/CD will become a commodity. So whether it's pipeline engine, chat tops, or whatever common building block, all of them will become available in open source and private source. They will be reusable and they will definitely become a part of any modern system. So you can take example, for example, Tekton. Tekton is used in multiple projects by the moment, and I believe that it will continue like that. So for vendors, it won't be the main idea to create a CI/CD system. it will rather go in the same direction like it happens in other areas when basically data is the new oil, and observability, analytics, all kinds of data processing, and based on that decision making, this will become the main know-how and the main enterprise feature. Other sites, they will likely continue in open source because now you see a huge push towards DevOps culture, towards inner source, and all of that naturally gives advantage to open source because teams want to have more control over their systems, and using open source, being able to patch their systems is what is a big advantage, especially if systems become more modular and more maintainable. So that it can be easily done by developers with less of experience. And I think that it's what's going to happen, and it's already happening in CI/CD to some extent. So value of community, value of community roles, and the value of participation in communities for companies will gradually increase. And I encourage everyone to actually start thinking about that, whether it's CI/CD or other platform. You likely use a lot of open source, and actually being a part of open source communities is what will help you in the future. Not only to build your products, but also to run your infrastructure, to attract talent to your company. All of them will keep accelerating.
I agree 100%. Community is the future, right? Everybody agrees.
Yes.
Just a reminder, I'm head of community at Incredibuild, so community is the future. Thank you, Oleg. And so any additional points on this before we go? We've got some audience questions here too, but before we get to that, I want to see if anybody has any additional points on the future here.
I think that one of the questions resonates very well with the future. And actually, this is one of the questions I'm asking myself as well. There's a question here regarding services already provided by all cloud services. So sorry, no, this wasn't this one. They're asking about open source, and the cloud. Here it is. As everyone moving towards the cloud, how do we see the DevOps and pipeline services provided by the cloud services providers itself, say open source, whether cloud services provider? And I think that, there was, with everything went between Elasticsearch and Amazon, taking open source, making it a service, whether open source can even offer itself as a service. This is I think that we are in a position in time where this is where there's a complex environment for open sources, because in order to provide the service, it's a difficult task for an open source, and we are going towards services also in the world of CI/CD. So I think that this is a very relevant question for the future as well, and I'd be more than happy to hear my colleagues on that as well.
Go ahead, Oleg.
Yeah, I think that there are two parts of the question. Whether there will be more services for continuous integration and delivery provided by public cloud services. Of course, yes. All current vendors already provide services for that. Amazon maybe provide 10 of that by this moment, etc. They think that it doesn't necessarily say that it will be a competition to open source, because what you can also see that even for companies like Amazon, it is incredibly costly to build a CI/CD system which would address use case of enterprises. And what you can also see that many vendors currently adopt open source technologies. So for example, Picton is being adopted by OpenShift, it's being adopted by IBM Cloud, it's being adopted by GCP, and I believe that this trend will continue. Because it's not enough to just provide a pipeline engine. Pipeline engine is a very simple thing. Well, not really, but it's relatively simple. But providing the entire ecosystem, even for monsters like Amazon and Google, is still a very costly endeavor. And moreover, not every company would like to lock in so much in this ecosystem, because CI/CD system should still provide support for target environments. And not everyone will go with Amazon. Many people will want to have multi-cloud solutions so that they could migrate. And for that, they will also want to have independent tools so that they are not locked in a single environment for good.
Yeah, so in this new company that I launched, I finally had the pleasure of using other CI services like for production. And then my view is obviously biased, but I feel like those are just, in some sense, they're just trying to check some checkboxes. Like I didn't really feel like they're putting a lot of effort behind it. Like both in terms of like a standalone mechanism, but also more importantly, connected to all the other things that they do. I thought that was the kind of value prop if it works well, like back then IBM famously did it. But so I wasn't too impressed. On the other hand, like, if people are starting from somewhere and they are not particularly feeling like I need to, this is something I need to have, then it could be a reasonable starting point. And then once you start using it, then you start to develop like what doesn't work for you and whatnot. And then like you have more informed perspective to choose the next right step for the journey. And I think that often happens, right? Like, I started biking during this pandemic, and first I started with like a bike that my wife had, and then so I rode it for like a good 8 months, and then like I knew what I'm really looking for. So next time, like I didn't mind spending $2,000 buying a bike because I know what I needed. So I think it's something like that.
You need a bike lock is what you need for a $3,000 bike.
Yeah.
Security, right?
The most successful in terms of using CI/CD teams are the ones that are owning the solution. From my experience, of course, they own the complete solution, and that means they have full control over what and why they are getting from it. And sometimes you have those Jenkins wizards that will set up complete system for you within half an hour or an hour, but that's not always the case. And then it's great to have something that will work out of the box, and you have your first step, and then you learn what you actually want. So I don't think it's one or the other. It must be some kind of mix, and it's not gonna be one winning over the other. Like there is no silver bullet, right? We have different use cases, and different tools are answering different needs.
So somebody said it at one of our events a while ago, let the rules define the tools, don't let the tools define the rules. So figure out what you need first, right? And like the size of the team is going to matter too. And I think I used to run to that a lot, where you'd be working with a very large company, but then you're working with just a team within that company, and they're only thinking about their team and not thinking about the bigger picture. So it was important to have, I guess the holy grail for them was let the developers all use whatever they want to use, and then we have some overarching architecture or orchestrator that pulls it all together. And that's not easy to achieve.
And of course, Jim, if it rhymes, it's probably true.
Yeah, I only remember things that rhyme. Okay, we've got time for a few. Oh, go ahead, Kohsuke.
Yes, I mean, you talked about this like a small team in large org, like doing their own thing, and that's something I've been interested in. I still don't have a good answer. Like clearly, like some successful large-scale software development shop managed to, develop like a one way to do things that doesn't seem to be getting in the way of people, and that makes sense. Like that's how you gain the economy of scale. But a lot more large organization is nowhere near that, and they have a local team, not more empowered. Like they frame it positively to do their own thing. So even it's like a large, it's a large company, but like not really gaining any scale benefit. But I see some logic in that, like how it's saying like more. It makes sense that the people who are owning the solution are more successful. So. Like having a hard time reconciling those two views and how you manage to get to the latter, like a Google kind of software development where there's like a one way to do it. So yeah, I'm curious how do we see the trend from one to the other, like, or is that just I'm curious.
Well, we have time for just one or two more of these questions here. I want to respect everyone's time. But let me I want to go to the first one on here. So where do you see prioritization with CI/CD helping shape application architecture versus application architecture defining CI/CD? And I think that plays into kind of what we were just talking about, right? Anybody want to take a first stab at that?
Did anybody ever get to have like a CI/CD dictate their application architecture? That's news to me.
Maybe the architecture of the CI/CD, Kohsuke.
Yeah, I don't.
Definitely know a few companies who have CI/CD architects working on the internal solutions. So yeah, it's not uncommon.
Let me see if
I think we answered that. I don't remember exactly who answered that, but I think that really it's how one of the participants said before. I think it's really the matter of your goals and what you need. So it means that you really want to understand what you need before picking the tool, especially today. You know, if you were talking 10 years ago, probably the answer would have been easier and you just pick the best available tool, which weren't that many, and just try to do whatever you want with the boundaries that the tool provides you with. But today, you know, you can go and shop so many different solutions for many different, specializing in many different options. So I believe that especially for today, if you understand where you want to go and what your purpose is and which industry you're at and what's the challenges that you want to accommodate, then take all of this together, and you need to first find the right tool for you instead of just grabbing the first tool and then try to make it work for your goals, especially today.
Yeah, one of my colleagues loves to ask the question, what is the problem you're trying to solve here? And that like without understanding the answer for that, you can't say one is better than the other. And I am all for CI/CD helping to shape the application. I would be super scared if it was defining the shape of the application. So wording is important here. But in my understanding, CI/CD is there to help. It's not to set rules and things like that. You're defining the rules. You're defining everything, and the tools are supposed to help you follow them and get to the solution, whatever the problem you defined.
Right. So now that I understand the question a little better, like if I think about part of like what drives the application architecture is the need to maintain the velocity of the software change, then obviously like what we are doing in the CI/CD is a key part of delivering, like controlling the velocity change. So it stands to reasons like that plays a major role. In some sense, like one of the reasons like microservices architecture is like heralded by many is like it allows a larger teams to be to be divided into smaller autonomous units that like make their own progress on their own pace. So, like I think the CI/CD system is kind of working in harmony with these ideas. I guess, yeah. So that's maybe like how I understood what the question was trying to address.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kohsuke. And I think we have time for one more question here before the end of our session. This is in relation to embedded solutions. So it seems like a lot of the innovation landscape changes, example, moving to the cloud, et cetera, are good for the mobile platforms, web apps, et cetera. At our company, we develop software for embedded devices. We're having a hard time adapting these new technologies, containers, et cetera, for our purposes. What advice would you give to an embedded development team for CI/CD?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Oleg.
If you want to go ahead. Yeah, so first I would like to say that in embedded the things are also changing, because how we knew embedded 10 years, 15 years ago, it slowly goes away. So now you can see continuous delivery in embedded, you can see a lot of edge computing, Internet of Things, and basically even if the embedded industry is behind software, the approaches are the same. And you can already see that there is a wide adoption of cloud native technologies in embedded. For example, K3S by Rancher, it explicitly focuses on edge computing. It has a lot of proven use cases for embedded devices, and I believe that it will continue. Of course, the performance requirements will keep native solutions, but I think that the most of use cases in the future will be the connected. So when you have a device and a service, which is classic software, or combined as a kind of computing system, including edge components. And in all these cases, what happens? The software now get ready to that coming to the embedded and even hardware space in several years.
I was, clearly, you worked in the embedded space, so I'd love to hear more on that. But I do feel like, I kind of really resonate with the people, the person who asked this question. Like, clearly a lot of the progress in the past few years came from, the building the web app where you can make changes rapidly, and you have a lot of traffic from the productions that can be used to validate what your system is. So, a lot of these practices simply doesn't apply to this different form factor that we see, like a disconnected, or somewhat connected, even somewhat connected, the mobile embedded devices. So, who are innovating in this space? They're gotta be making some progress, and I want to talk to these people, and I want to understand what they are doing. So, it feels like there's a growing divide, and embedded development is not going away, but is it going to become like a relatively esoteric, ancient practices when the web app can make it's a whole new level of productivity? That could very well be. It's kind of looking more and more like that.
Anybody else? Ulina, Dory?
Well, this is not very elaborate answer, but when I hear embedded software, I think Jenkins is the answer. But that's what I see is currently, that's the present. But yeah, I don't have
Well,
to add.
Jenkins, because it's a framework, and it was really helpful to me when I started my career. When it was still Hudson, it's still very relevant now. At the same time, Jenkins is not the only automation framework on the market. So, of course, I'm happy to embrace Jenkins, but you can also take a look at other systems. So, for example, GitHub Actions is de facto a framework with all its advantages and all its weaknesses. Also, the same applies to Drone. Well, I would rather recommend Woodpecker these days, and many other tools which still build a kind of framework. So for embedded space, I expect that it will continue, because I have never seen a good specialized tool for this area. There are such tools. I won't mention names, but from what I see, people usually opt out to generic tools. And it's really important because there is no longer embedded design. When you design embedded, you design it along with classic software, whether it's mobile application, server side. When you design hardware, you usually co-design it with software, and hence generic tools is what you need.
Well, thank you, Oleg.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone, we're just a minute or two over. I want to respect everyone's time and wrap up. But before we do, I want to thank all of you, Oleg, Kohsuke, Ulina, Dory, for being part of this conversation. Very, very, I think we could have gone on for another couple of hours easily, right? There's lots of other things to talk about. We covered a lot of ground here. I was just thinking too, though, as we're wrapping up, but maybe we can do this another 20 years and we can laugh about what we were talking about on this one.
In 2 years, Jim. We'll laugh in 2 years.
That's right. But again, thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. Thank you for all of our attendees for tuning in. Thanks for all of our people on LinkedIn that were watching this live stream there. And I hope to see all of you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye, guys. It was a pleasure.